Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Gangrene Against the World podcast. I'm Allan Simon. It is Giants week, and man, it has been a full week of the New York Giants as they've had 2 joint scrimmages, and it's all leading up to the game on Saturday where the Jets will face the Giants at MetLife Stadium. It will be a Giants home game, so you should see more blue than green, but you'll probably see a good mix as these two teams try to take the energy of successful opening weeks of the preseason and keep the momentum going. These are two teams that have a lot to prove, right? The Giants really, since the boat trip disaster, have been an embarrassing team in the league. They come off their most embarrassing season they've ever had in their 100th season as the New York Giants. So we'll get into that more when we get to the matchup portion with my friend Sean Kenney, and looking forward to that conversation and getting the Giants' perspective of this week 2 matchup. But what we did have was a calmer week of practice for the New York Jets. And we talked about it after the game, that being able to have a first drive with Justin Fields and the starting offense go right down the field, score a touchdown, it quieted all of the nonsense and all of the panic we were experiencing after a couple of weeks of training camp, in which the days leading up to that game were not great, right? Justin Fields was not good. Beat reporters were just reporting the facts, but you would think that Connor Hughes was the enemy of the state when he lets you know that Justin Fields in scrimmages was not good leading up to that Packers game. What you will see is that he's had a good week of practice since. The joint scrimmages have been up and down for the offense, but they're facing in scrimmages what could be one of the best pass rushes in football with the Giants. But overall, it seems like there's a clear trend of the players that are really making their case for either more playing time or to make the roster at all. And we're also seeing as some guys really plummet. So from the Jets' perspective, before we get to our conversation with Sean Kenney, I did want to take a look at who's trending up and who's trending down. Trending up in terms of more playing time or being a starter potentially, or it could be trending up from a guy who we thought would not make the team to he will make the team, and then people going in the opposite direction as well. So let's start with 2 defensive linemen, Jay Tufele and Leonard Taylor. Their stocks are way up right now. The Jets have not brought in a veteran defensive lineman. After watching those 2 players play against the Packers, I don't know why, if I'm Darren Muji, I would be bringing in a veteran. It seems like there's depth there. Jay Tufele, does not have a long, extensive career of success, but has currently looked unblockable in camp and has played really well in the game action that we've seen him in. And Leonard Taylor, who has always been a nice prospect, looks like a guy who can maybe take the next step and solidify the defensive line. Jermaine Johnson is practicing this week, and he's going to be the person bookending Will McDonald when it comes to the defensive ends on this team, and him being activated so early makes me hopeful that week 1 he is close to 100%. And, there's a good chance Jay Tufele is the starting defensive tackle next to Quinnen Williams, and Quinnen Williams isn't healthy yet. We won't see him most likely in game 2 as he's nursing an injury. So we need Jay Tufele and Leonard Taylor to continue to show in this week against the Giants that they are a promising addition to this defensive line. Another guy who I think may have locked in his role on this team is Andrew Beck. And, the Jets are looking to be a top 5 running team in this league. And they have a fullback who could be a lead blocker, and also showed in the game against the Packers he's got nimble hands who could bring the ball in out of the backfield. He had a really nice day. We're now talking about a lot of backs making the 53-man roster, so it makes things a little dicey for maybe some of the lower end wide receivers if they just have 5 receivers on the roster. And what it does also make a little complicated is the next guy whose stock is way up, and that's Donovan Edwards. Donovan Edwards, the undrafted free agent from Michigan, had a really nice career at Michigan. He showed some real explosiveness against the Packers. He had a long touchdown that was taken away by a questionable penalty at best, but also had some nice runs. He caught a ball out of the backfield and had a nice run after the catch. Overall, Donovan Edwards' stock is up, and what makes it really promising is that we've seen him returning kicks in practice. So it looks like the Jets are giving Donovan Edwards every opportunity to make this team, and that's exciting if you like to see his skill set. He's looked extremely explosive, which is great. So he's someone who's going to probably get a lot of playing time against the Giants and someone to see. So Donovan Edwards will be getting a lot of playing time against the Giants, and he has another opportunity to make some noise. Another interesting one is Adrian Martinez. So Tyrod Taylor is confirmed out for the rest of the preseason. Listen, Tyrod's a veteran. There's a good chance he can step in and be the backup right away in week 1, even without taking a snap in the preseason. But what this does mean is that Adrian Martinez, who looked very good against the Packers, has a real opportunity to be the number 2 quarterback on this team against the Pittsburgh Steelers. 11 for 16, 152 and a touchdown is a really nice performance, preseason or not. And I think he's going to get a ton of playing time along with Brady Cook in these next 2 preseason games to see who will be the long-term third string quarterback, but also who could potentially be the number 2 when we kick things off. Last, and I would say most impressively, the person whose stock is way, way up is Arian Smith, the 4th-round draft pick who got terrible reviews when he was drafted. Coming into camp, there were a lot of question marks. He had a few drops to begin camp. People were a little concerned. Did we really waste this again as they watch guys like Malachi Corley really struggle? He has been turning heads in camp. He had a quiet game against the Packers, had a couple of catches, but in camp, he has made some explosive plays. He has shown how fast he is with the ball in his hand, making leaping catches in the joint scrimmage against the Giants. Listen, wide receiver 2 is wide open on this Jets team. And Josh Reynolds has looked really impressive, but there is no reason with the speed Arian Smith has that he cannot be the receiver at the end of the season with the 2nd most receptions on this team. That's a huge jump from a guy we all thought might have been a dud to, is he a wide receiver too? He has a lot more to show, but I really like what he's shown in camp, and speed kills, right? And if you're going to be running the ball and you've got a guy in Justin Fields who maybe you don't love throwing the ball downfield, having a guy who can stay close to the line of scrimmage and catch the ball, but then still make plays after is very, very valuable. So here are the players that are struggling and, are either going to have a hard time solidifying playing time, but also there's a good chance they may not make the roster. And we're going to start with everyone's favorite punching bag, Michael Clemens. And listen, Michael Clemens has never been able to take the pure athleticism that he has and the aggression that he shows and hone it into being a consistent every down defensive lineman. What he has shown is that he can't keep his temper in check, and he commits way too many penalties, both mental and physical. It's not just like it's always roughing the passer or it's these over-exuberant penalties, it's just because he's wired and he's operating at a high level. No, he's also committing a lot of offsides and encroachments like we saw a bunch last year. You can't pair that with not great play in camp and against the Packers, while other defensive linemen are stepping up and getting healthy, and think that there's a role for him on this team. I think there's a really good chance he's someone who's buried on the bench, and in this Aaron Glenn system of holding people accountable, I'm not saying that he's definitely going to be cut because I think he's probably better than some of the lowest tier players on this team, but he's certainly in danger. Another player who I think we can say has a real shot of being cut is Xavier Gipson. And it's tough, right? In football, injuries can cost you your job. There's a lot of competition for returners on this team. We saw 3 of them play really well against the Packers while Gipson was on the sideline. Gipson has never shown to be a consistent pass catcher. And also, let's not forget how scary it was watching him return kicks every single day last year. He drops a lot of punts. He muffs a lot of opportunities. Listen, he has some crazy highlight reels. That Bills game where he has the walk-off punt return for a touchdown is one of the great live sporting moments I've got to experience, especially as a Jets fan. But that doesn't hold water in his 3rd year. There's a lot of competition for this returner job on this team with guys who can do multiple things, and Gipson can really just return kicks. And now that you have Edwards returning kicks as well, it looks like all the signs are pointing to that Xavier Gipson's going to have to be finding a new roster after this. Malachi Corley's stock is down, although I will say him looking pretty good in the return game may have saved his spot. And again, it's going to be really interesting to see the returners play against the Giants, but he had nice returns in the punt and kick game. You still think there's hope of him as a pass catcher, but he is not Darren Muji's pick. I think it is very easy to let someone like him go, a mid-round wide receiver who just doesn't seem to have it. But again, if he can stand as a returner, then maybe he has an opportunity And last is Jeremy Ruckert. And, Long Island kid, Jets fans like him. Jets fans want him to be good. He's a good blocker, but he's shown nothing else. And Mason Taylor passed him almost immediately as tight end 1. And you're looking at Stone Smart, 6'4", has caught passes in this league before. And he looks like he's pretty locked in to steal that second tight end position job from Ruckert. He caught a touchdown against the Packers. So Ruckert against the other tight ends will be very interesting to see. Overall, it has been a much less dramatic week in Jets camp, and even in the joint practices against the Giants, there were a few, mix-ups and kerfuffles, but overall, no one's taking helmets off and no one's fighting too much. I do think it'll be interesting to see how the Jets play against the team they've been practicing against all week. That always leads to more penalties and more aggression, because you get sick of the guys who've been hitting you like crazy. So it should be really exciting to see these two teams face off. Coming up after this historic moment between the Giants and the Jets, we're going to have Sean Kenney on the podcast to give the Giants perspective. Excited to talk to Sean and hear what he has to say about the emerging superstars on this Giants roster, but they're being paired with a coaching staff and GM that maybe is now in-house a year too late. So we'll be right back after this play in Giants-Jets history.
3rd and 10. Wilson is going to try to do it himself, and he does! Zach Wilson gets the first third down conversion of the day for the New York Jets. Flag is down. Wilson down the middle of the field. Garrett Wilson has it at the 45. Flag is down. Lawrence is in the backfield. Wilson escapes, throws on the run. He's got a man. First down. Jets have to hurry though. Here we go. Zerline, 35-yard attempt to send the game to overtime. Kick on the way, and it is good! And we got bonus football in Jersey.
Game for basically the last 2.5 quarters, and it comes alive in 2 plays. Massive chunks down the field. Incredible.
So much has happened in this last 2 minutes or so of this game. From the Kayvon sack on 4th down to the Giants just trying to run the clock out. And I can't help but think the last thing you want to do is use the fact that you don't have your quarterback in as the excuse.
3rd and 21. DeVito, pass deflected and incomplete. Greg Zerline, 33 yards away for the win. Kick on the way, and it is good! The Jets win it!
Welcome back to the Gangrene Against the World podcast. I'm Allan Simon. I am joined by Sean Kenney, who's going to give us a little rundown of the Giants' perspective as we head into week 2 of the preseason. And Sean, before I get a sense of your vibe heading into camp this year and heading into the second game, I just want to remind Giants fans, and feel free to cover your ears if you don't want to hear these numbers again, but 3-14, most losses in franchise history, worst winning percentage in franchise history, all to celebrate the 100th year of Giants history. For a franchise that is one of the greats in all of sports, not exactly what you want. And what do? You bring back the coach and GM. So I'm curious, Sean, with all that said, what's the Giants fans feel heading into camp and now a couple weeks into camp?
Yeah, well, thanks for that dig, and thanks for having me on. Yeah, I kind of actually have a monologue of myself of what it's been like in that 100th season. I actually got to go to the first game and be there for the crazy jerseys and and just watch us just kind of collapse and start the season that way against Minnesota. We go on Hard Knocks, and that's kind of how we started the year. You know, we lose Wink Martindale, and he has a falling out with Brian Daboll, and they release the special teams coordinator. They release the offensive line coach. Saquon goes to Philadelphia. They win the Super Bowl. Terrible. We lost, like you said, we lost the most games in franchise history. We finished last in the NFC. You know, you lose Andrew Thomas, you lose Dexter Lawrence for the year. Franchise quarterback gets cut mid-season, you know, after a terrible game against Carolina, for better or for worse, right? And we miss out on the first overall pick. That's another thing, right? We win that game against the Colts there towards the end of the season. Eli doesn't get in the Hall of Fame. It's just as bad as it can be, right? So I kind of have to just say, like, maybe it can't get any worse than that, right? I think that's as bad as it can get.
That's
in
quite
a year.
the run. When you say that all in a few sentences, it is an impressive amount of dysfunction for a team called the Giants and not named the Jets. As a Jets fan, first off, I'm a Jets fan in a Giants family, which is always a frustration. I did marry into a Jets family, luckily, but I'm watching the Giants dysfunction, and I'm always amazed that there's not more backlash. I do think last year really, brought to light that, hey, there's a fundamental issue with this team. And I know you don't want to fire, your fourth head coach after 2 years, but at some point you have to say, hey, until you find the right person, you got to keep cleaning house. You got to make the system work. You're going to bring in a rookie quarterback. You're going to bring in a placeholder quarterback. We should have a new head coach so it's done the right way. What were your thoughts on Dable being brought back and Joe Shane being brought back after the last few years?
Yeah, I think they're in the fourth year of their current contract, right? So they've had a couple seasons. This is not, a new group, and coaches get fired and general managers get fired in the first year sometimes of a regime. I think you've got an ownership group that cares a lot about sticking to the original contract, sticking to learning from what they did wrong in the past, a bit for better or worse. You had Dave Gettleman there with Pat Shurmur. They fired him kind of midway through, kept the GM, didn't fired the coach, kept the GM, and then did the same thing with Joe Judge, and they finally cleaned house, right? And so I think it's a package deal. So for me, watching this kind of unfold over the year, going into the season, I was all team Daboll Shane, and at the end of this season, I was like, either get them both out of there or let's give them a chance to have a quarterback, right? And they went with the latter. So I'm a little surprised by that, because it sounded like the buzz at the end of the year was that they would get fired, and at least Daboll would. But the ownership kind of got behind them and gave them that vote of confidence for another year. So now I don't know what to expect, because we got a new quarterback in there, and it kind of resets the clock. So I'm cautiously optimistic going into this year.
And I've got to say, when it looked like that Daboll was going to lose his job, I think he's a really good coach. And, he made the playoffs with Daniel Jones. And I think Colts fans are about to see just how impressive that is, because that roster was not great. And listen, you could talk about, they were lucky that year. They won a lot of one-possession games. Whatever, you made the playoffs. The Jets haven't made the playoffs in 15 years. To me, that is something. But I think what makes it tricky is with, although not the most acclaimed prospect in Dart, you still have a rookie quarterback, and if things don't go well, so okay, you fire the coach, you fire the GM, and now you need the incoming GM and coach to say, fine, I'll take on this quarterback, and then the cycle repeats itself. What I will say is Russell Wilson, whether he's the corniest man in all of football and the cheesiest dude and kind of hard to watch, that is a professional quarterback. That is a top 20 quarterback still in the league. You can make the playoffs with him. Jameis Winston is proven to be one of the best backups. And then that rookie quarterback can sit there and really learn from two vets who've been in the league for a very long time. So there are positives within this. So when it comes to being an optimistic Giants fan on the shinier side of things, what are the things you're looking most forward to about this team? And what are the things about this team to make you say, hey, you know what, if the right things fall in place again, like it did a couple years ago, this could be a competing team in December?
Yeah, I think quarterback is number one, right? Like, it's Jets fans know it. It's like the quarterback purgatory, or you get stuck going through the cycle of, drafting high or getting a veteran in that you get excited about, and they don't live up to the expectation. And I'm just moving past Daniel Jones is a big deal. We've had him as quarterback for 6 years and lived through enough losses to count. And so I have to feel better about, one, just having a veteran presence in the room and a guy that's proven and won in the league. He's at the back end of his career in Russell Wilson, right? But does bring you that leadership, does bring you kind of a new energy in the quarterback room, and Jameis Winston to kind of go with that as two veterans there, and excitement about a new quarterback, right? A young quarterback that you can potentially be your franchise guy, back end of the first round. So development needed there. but you give him some time with these vets. And then the defense, right? Like the Giants defense before some injuries were leading the league in sacks, right? So that's without Abdul Carter. So now you bring in an Abdul Carter and you add some other pieces to the defense in the back end, and you have to feel good about a defense that might be able to keep teams low scoring enough that you can stay in some games.
100%.
So that's the kind of the only thing that I can really kind of pin on, us kind of looking forward.
Well, there's two things you have to do in the NFL. You got to rush the passer, and you got to have some sort of offensive aerial attack. And when you look at that pass rush with, Abdul Carter looks like the real deal immediately. I know that they're still wearing practice jerseys and it's been one preseason game, but he jumps off the tape in a way that is hard to ignore. You have a guy like Burns, who's a professional and a veteran and a leader, and you have Thibodeau. All of a sudden, there's a lot of ways to get to the passer. And offensively, you got Malik Neighbors, who, with no one throwing to him, still had one of the great rookie seasons of all time for the Giants. So there's definitely positives there. And, from a Jets perspective, in the joint scrimmage, you heard a lot about the young offensive lineman getting beat by the Giants pass rush. And I was like, yeah, that's going to happen. This might be the best pass rush in football. So you're going to get beat, but I'd rather you learn in practice and play against the best. So hopefully come week 1, you're ready to go. So the one question I do have for you, though, with all those positives is if you look at the offensive line with the not healthy Thomas still, right, still on the PUP list, Neal, who might be one of the most hated Giants in the history of football, still fighting for a starting position because he was a first-round draft pick and you don't have a lot of linemen. So what's the sense around the offensive line and how do you see things shaking out, once they eventually get healthy?
Yeah. It'd been like 10 years of offensive line just bad play, right? Just kind of also can attribute that to quarterback play, but we just couldn't even get the run game going with Saquon Barkley at running back, right? So it's just been bad for a long time. I think last year you kind of saw some progress towards a competent offensive line from like a total disaster to something that's competent in the NFL. We added some veterans in Jermaine Illuminor and John Runyon and Greg Van Roten to kind of fill in those spots. Truthfully, the key to this offensive line is whether Andrew Thomas can stay healthy.
Yeah.
Because if he's not in the game, now you're looking at your swing tackle and James Hudson coming in, or maybe a rookie 5th-round pick starting, and you're going back to a situation where quarterback's getting hit, and Russell Wilson's a quarterback that takes a lot of sacks. So, I'm again there. I'm liking the progress. I don't see it as I don't see this young group like the Jets have, where you kind of feel good about what's to come. You hope you can get salvage something out of Evan Neal at guard there, and whether he's the backup guard behind both left and right, or if he can work his way into a starting role by sometime towards the beginning of the season. You can hope for that. Just not that optimistic about him and that group, and it really runs through Andrew Thomas. If he's healthy, I think it can be a good enough group to get us through a lot of the season with the weapons we have on the outside and Neighbors and Theo inside, right? I think that gives you some optimism of scoring some more points.
Yeah, and you'd hope that Dable, not just hope, but Dable needs to show that he can take these pieces and make it a competent offense. Russell Wilson does know how to get the ball out of his hands. He's been in the league a very long time. You don't want him sitting around too long. He's not as mobile as he used to be, but with the weapons you have, a decent young running back as well, you should be able to design an offense that gets the ball out really quickly, runs the ball a little bit, and then you have some outside threats that maybe you take a shot here or there. It's crazy with the Giants is there's legitimate superstars on this team. Yeah. Just the rest of the pieces just haven't really yielded into something that's a cohesive looking team. I am curious to get your perspective too. For the Jets, there's a lot of competition right now for different roster spots and also starting spots. For the Giants, it looks like a young player like Montrell Robinson might steal a roster spot. Along with Robinson, who are some of the other players you're looking to step up in the different position battles the Giants have heading into week 2 of the preseason?
Yeah, I think you're going to see some opportunity at the wide receiver position. We at the 4th spot and in the slot, right? Montrell Washington being a good backup slot wide receiver behind Wandale could earn a spot, right? We saw some flash plays in the first preseason game and through practice throughout training camp. So certainly opportunities there within the wide receiver position. I'm curious to see how Jalen Hyatt works out this year with Russell, who is a deep ball threat and can move it down the field, right? so he can play into some of those strengths that Jalen Hyatt has. It's kind of the best chance he has to make some plays as a player and prove himself as a third-round pick. I also like Turbo Miller, a running back. He's right now fourth string. He's getting a lot of chances with Cam Scadaboo out. Made some nice plays in that first game, had a long screen pass. He's kind of like a twitch guy and quick one cut go kind of guy. Undersized, but can give you a lot of speed on the outside. And then I think, at the guard position, right, Evan Neal and does he actually step into that role? Like, is he gonna be someone you can rely on? And I know he'll likely be on the team throughout this year, but does this year give him an opportunity to play next year? So, I think, along the offensive side, there's a lot of positions I think up for grabs that give some players a chance and ability to make a contribution. I mean, I don't know if we have any Victor Cruzes in this year's group, but we can only hope, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's two things from that. One, with Evan Neal, if he was just an underperforming first-round pick who didn't call Giants fans a bunch of burger flippers, I think then, you say, hey, this is now, year 3, year 4, maybe he shows something, maybe there's something there that is worth him being on the team long term. But because he has been so volatile and has underperformed horribly at the position, this needs to be the year for him for sure. And it's funny you bring up Victor Cruz, and I hate Giants-Jets games. I've always hated them. Going back to 2003, where Chad Pennington breaks his finger, on the follow through of a throw on a helmet, and it basically ends, any promise of that season. He comes back and he's terrible. Of course, there's the famous, really infamous Rex Ryan putting in Mark Sanchez in a preseason game because he wants to win the Snoopy Bowl. And Mark Sanchez tears his shoulder up and, is really never the same after that moment. And then Victor Cruz, who's had amazing moments in preseason against the Jets. That's when everyone learned who he was. A kid from Paterson, New Jersey, has a 3-touchdown, 100-yard performance against the Jets in the preseason, which was a cool moment until he takes the ball 99 yards on Christmas Eve and ruins my Christmas, ruins the Jets season, and propels the Giants to a Super Bowl run. So this is a long way of saying I dread this game every single year. From a Giants perspective, just what are Jets-Giants games to you? We're both Yankee fans, so we're used to the big brother, little brother thing, but just in general, when you think Giants-Jets, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think it's been a while since we've been able to be competitive with each other about it. And that's unfortunate, right? Because the crosstown rivalry is kind of fun, even if it is preseason. And then for me, we've had good moments rather than bad ones. I think outside of maybe Eli getting hit and having the bloody face the one year.
That's right, yeah.
But I think we're both like these young teams right now. So I think I'm like really looking forward to kind of having this be a turning point and a potential of a rivalry kind of moving forward where you've got two young teams with some good core pieces that are building and kind of looking forward to seeing what that can create. Cause it really hasn't been since the Rex Ryan, Tom Coughlin years that we've been able to say, oh, this team's good and that team's good. And the cycle of that has made it really hard to take jabs at each other. We're already taking jabs from the whole league.
Yeah, I mean, the talk about the punching bag of the league. But, it's interesting you said, too, talk about the difference about two teams in 2011 who are playoff caliber teams. The Jets coming off 2 straight AFC championship games. The Giants were, looked down and out and then go on an incredible run. It all starts with the Christmas Eve game, but the energy in the city around these two teams when they're both good is so exciting. And then you flash forward a dozen years to 2023, where Zach Wilson has the worst comeback in the history of football in a 13-10 game that might be the worst overtime game ever played between two professional sports teams. And it's just kind of sad to think like, man, it's been a really long time since both these teams could be good. But I agree with you that it is fun to see where the emergence can be between these two teams. I will ask too, just curious, I know from a Jets fan perspective, we've been saying, hey, I'd rather be in the Jets situation than a Giants situation, although it hasn't panned out any better or worse, right? It's been about as bad. But if you look at these two teams, if you were to guess which team makes the playoffs first between the two of them, where would you diagnose that?
Well, if it was a couple years ago, I would say the Jets for sure, because and look at In that game, actually, that 13-10 game that year, look, the optimism was great for both of us. Actually, it was probably the last time we had a little bit of that, with Aaron Rodgers coming over for the first year of his contract, and then the Giants coming off a playoff win. There was some excitement then. I think it's, the NFC here. I'll just say this: the Giants are in a very difficult division, right?
Yeah.
So you've got 3 playoff caliber teams, and the Eagles, who just came off a Super Bowl win, the Washington, who made it to the NFC Championship game, and Dallas Cowboys are always traditionally competitive, especially in the regular season, right? But the NFC is just a weaker conference as it stands right now, right? And just don't have those top end quarterbacks like you do in the AFC. So I think the AFC is a harder route to go if you would want to be one of those kind of wild card sneak in teams. I think that's probably where we're going to have to start. Just given the top end of our divisions, the Bills have just been winning, right? And with Josh Allen there, until you feel comfortable enough with either the talent around your quarterback or maybe a new one at some point, it's hard to overthrow the Bills, right? So I don't know. If things change, it could tip more to the Jets. And I do think the Jets have a more talented roster up and down. But I kind of think the easier just kind of sneak in might be on the Giants end, because you might even be able to have a losing record and get in.
I agree.
It won't be this year for the Giants, though.
Yeah. No, I don't think the Giants are a playoff team this year. But what I will say is, where in these two organizations have we seen them make the playoffs before? And that is Brian Daboll, right? He's led this Giants team in a kind of the way that you're saying, right? You sneak in a little bit, but he's been there before, which makes me think he can do it again. And I think it's not a huge reach for the Giants to say, hey, if you can become a 6-7 win team this year, you have Dart learn under some veteran quarterbacks. There's no reason a year from now that they cannot be a team that's competing in the NFC as well. So overall, Sean, I'm just really excited to see these two teams play, and we're certainly in the dog days of the preseason. So I think it'll be fun to see these two teams kind of knock it out. And then in a couple of weeks from here, we're talking about week 1 of the NFL season. That's really exciting too. So Sean, thank you so much for joining on the Gangrene Against the World podcast, and we'll talk soon. All right.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Sean. Welcome back to the Gangrene Against the World podcast. I'm Allan Simon, and I meant to mention at the top, to those of you who commented on the different clips posted on Instagram and YouTube this week, yes, I am in a linen closet on vacation. That's why you see the great wood behind me and the lovely linens to my right and left, but I thought it had the right acoustics for what we were trying to do here. So yes, I am in the linen closet, and I look forward to maybe in this linen closet or somewhere else watching the Jets and Giants on Saturday. And I want to level set with some injuries from the Jets going into this week. Isaiah Davis is a little banged up with an ankle injury. Doesn't not seem to be too major, but I would not be surprised if we do not see a lot of action from him on Saturday. Ken Nwanwu, who's fighting for returner position, he hurt his calf in that game against the Packers. I think he might be able to suit up, and hopefully he can, so he can show that he could be a returner on this team. Jermaine Johnson, as we said, activated from the PUP list. I would not expect to see him in that game. Tyrod Taylor out for the rest of the preseason. He had knee surgery, should be back ready to go for week 1. Allen Lazard is questionable. He's going to be out a couple of weeks, so we won't see him probably for the rest of the preseason. We'll see if we'll ever see him again in a Jets uniform. And then Sauce Gardner's out with a calf, and so hopefully that's not too major. Calf injuries are really, really scary. Just talk to Aaron Rodgers' Achilles or anyone else who's missed so much time. Calves are tricky. So I really hope Sauce takes it easy the rest of the way so he's ready to go in week 1. So with that said, we're going to finish things off with the 5 things to watch from the Jets in week 2 of the preseason against the New York Giants. And we're going to start off at number 5, Adrian Martinez. Listen, he's going to probably be the first quarterback we see after Justin Fields from here on out, and he will likely start game 3 of the preseason, and he could very well be the backup for the Jets week 1 against the Steelers if Tyrod's not back. He has looked like a very calm, collected, competent quarterback in camp and also against the Packers, so excited to see what he can do in week 2 of the preseason. Number 4, Malachi Corley. Corley, again, had some really nice returns against the Packers. He did bring in 1 catch for 8 yards. You want to see a little bit more action from him on the receiving side, but most importantly for him to make this roster, he did have a 31-yard kick return and then also had 4 punt returns and looked competent, did break one for 13 yards. And overall, you want to see a punt returner who does not look scared of the moment or look a little jittery, and you just want someone who's not going to put the ball on the ground. So Corley has another opportunity to show that he should be on this team, and being a returner is probably his best opportunity. Number 3, the defensive line. We want to see more, again, out of Tufele and Leonard Taylor. There's still going to be opportunity there for some folks lower on the depth chart to maybe steal a roster spot, but we want to see that are these two guys who can be legitimate rotational players on this team. So let's see how they follow up a really great performance against the Packers. And then imagine this line that has, instead of Michael Clemens on the end, Jermaine Johnson, and that might be a really nice defensive line. Number 2, I want to see more first-team reps. Besides Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams and some of the banged-up starters, I want to see another drive from Justin Fields. I want to see them run the ball again against that defensive line of the Giants. I want to see how the talented tackles can handle the pass rush, and I think overall it's just good to see it in live game action. It does worry me health-wise when you play a team this much during the week and emotions are high, and then you have a live game and, someone makes a stupid play and gets a little excessive with the tackle, and then all of a sudden a starter is hurt. I'm not saying multiple possessions, but I would love to see another solid offensive possession from the Jets offense and see what the Jets starting defense can do. And number 1, Donovan Edwards is Jets Twitter's favorite guy right now. He was very explosive against the Packers. They're giving him opportunities to return kicks. We're going to see him in the run game again. He showed he can catch the ball. Can Donovan Edwards steal a roster spot on this team? So Giants and Jets, 2 of the worst teams in recent history, are playing in the preseason. There's not a lot of glamour behind that, but it's still exciting to see these 2 teams play. This has been episode 4 of the Gangrene Against the World podcast. I'm Allan Simon. Thank you so much for listening.